First of all, can I welcome this motion from Sinn Féin? It's a very straightforward motion and it goes directly to the heart of the matter. I had a look today at the average petrol pump prices and it's 184.9 for petrol and diesel is 179.9. Now this time last year, just 12 months ago, petrol was 19 cents less and diesel was 13 cents less per litre. And then I looked at April 2020, before the COVID pandemic, and I couldn't believe the figures myself actually. Petrol was 58 cents a litre less and diesel was 63 cents per litre less. And I suppose my question to you, Minister, is when are these prices going to stop soaring? I mean, the difference in price was so great, I actually checked and double-checked my figures. Because, Minister, speaking to people throughout my own constituency, and indeed in particular local forecourt owners along the border, it is quite clear that workers and families are not only bracing themselves for the next increase in excise, VAT and tax on fuel, they are actually dreading it. This evening, I suppose I'm particularly thinking of the man or woman with the van who travels countrywide just to keep the show on the road, whatever that show is. The workers who sometimes have to drive long distances just to get to work because, for whatever reason, they can't find work locally. Small building contractors with the van full to the brim of equipment, lugging it from one job to the next. Small wholesalers going from shop to shop, selling everything from fish to bread. And indeed, the large hauliers travelling the length and the breadth of the country, again selling their goods. Those are just some examples, the day-to-day examples of people struggling and trying to estimate how much the next rise is going to take from their disposable income and what will they have to forgo to keep the tank from emptying. Minister, not only are these measures piling on more pressure, for many small businesses, these increases may well be the last straw. And Minister, I have quoted these figures before, but they're worth hearing, because it shows very clearly that increases in fuel prices hits families in rural Ireland harder. If we look at the average number of kilometres driven each year, we see that the national average is 16,300 kilometres. But if you live in Sligo and Donegal, the average is 17,500. And if you live in Leitrim or Roscommon, it's 19,000 kilometres. So that tells you, Minister, that those price increases hit them harder. And while I will agree, improvements have been made in public transport, it's still not cutting back on that mileage because most people still need their cars to go to work. So again, Minister, this illustrates the unfairness that these increases, the disproportionate extra costs that they are having on rural Ireland. None of this, I know, is news to you, but I just want to reiterate it again. And on many occasions, I have raised the particular circumstance of those who own forecourts, petrol stations along the border. And I want to draw your attention to it again this evening. In advance of their briefing in the AV room tomorrow, Fuels for Ireland are telling us that by January 2025, we can reasonably expect that, all else remaining equal, petrol and diesel will be between 20 and 24 cents cheaper per litre in Northern Ireland than in the Republic, if you go ahead with your planned policies and increases on excise, carbon tax and increases to the level of biofuels used in transport fuels. That's the reality, Minister, for those who are trying to sell fuel along the border. Even if the UK government reintroduces excise duties, you're still looking at a difference of 20 cents per litre. Minister, I do understand that the revenue you raise is significant and will be spent elsewhere. But surely the department has to look at the possible loss of revenue from consumers crossing the border to fill their petrol tanks. It's actually leading to a loss of much additional revenue when the consumer is bypassing the local petrol station and travelling across the border. And when they do, they often buy most of their groceries because there is a significant difference in price, let's say, on things like alcohol, children's toys, etc. So, Minister, you're not just losing revenue on fuel, you're losing it on so many other products as well that people will buy. I have spoken to many owners of forecourts operating along the border. They're on their knees, they're trying to keep the prices as low as possible, and they know that any further increase in excise for them is just a kick in the teeth. And I'm asking you to reverse the increase that was added in April, and if you can't do that, at the very least, abandon any further increases this year. Because, Minister, I'm really asking that you would ask your department to sit down and do the figures, do the math, as they say. Look at all of those people who live reasonably close to the border. We have a very long border. If you take the counties of Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim, Cavan, Monaghan and Louth, you have well over 500,000 people there. If you add Meath, which is pretty close to the border, you're looking at 750,000 people. If a substantial number of those people decide it's worth their while to cross the border because petrol or diesel is 20 cents cheaper for every single litre, that's a huge loss of revenue to the state. And as I said, the fact that they will almost certainly buy a lot of their groceries and other goods when they cross the border. So if you do nothing else, Minister, could I ask you to do some kind of analysis on those figures? Because at the end of the day, you want the maximum amount in your coffers, you want it there so that it can be spent in other ways. But the worst possible outcome would be that you would lose revenue and at the same time businesses along the border would close.